On that Christmas evening, the cold in Ohio cut to the bone, seeping through my thin jacket as I stood by the gleaming oak door. The phone in my hand still held the warmth from my grandfather's brief call. "Nicholas, come quickly. I am at your parents' new house," he had said. There was a certain joy in his voice, as if he was about to reveal an incredible secret. My grandfather George, a successful businessman, always busy with his construction company in Chicago, rarely found the time to visit. The thought that I would see him brought an involuntary smile to my face despite the freezing winter night. I pushed the door open, and the warmth of a blazing fireplace and the scent of roasted meat enveloped me. My grandfather was sitting at the head of the large table. His eyes sparkled when he noticed me. He stood up and hugged me tightly. The familiar woody scent of his cologne instantly eased my fatigue. "Nicholas, do you like this house?" he asked proudly, as though handing me a priceless gift. "Yes, the house is beautiful, Grandpa," I replied, trying to speak calmly. "But this is my parents' house." The room fell silent, as if the air had suddenly grown heavy. My grandfather's face froze, his eyes widened. He glanced from me to my father, Michael, then to Ellen, my stepmother, who was sitting across the table. My father, usually composed, had turned pale, and his hand trembled as it held a glass of wine. Ellen coughed lightly, forcing a strained smile, but a flicker of unease passed through her gaze. "Your parents' house?" my grandfather repeated, his voice turning icy and sharp, like the wind outside the window. "Nicholas, explain." I did not even understand what was happening myself, but a wave of unease washed over me. I looked at my father, expecting him to speak, but he only lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. Ellen quickly interrupted, her voice trembling. "George, this is a misunderstanding. This is a family home." But my grandfather did not even glance at her. He kept his eyes fixed directly on me. And in that moment, I understood that something was about to be revealed, something that would change my life forever. My name is Nicholas Marston. The story I want to tell is about the years I spent in the shadow of injustice, when I was nothing more than a shadow in my own family. If you have ever felt that you do not belong anywhere, that you are seen as an outsider, perhaps you will understand me. And if not, I still ask you to listen. This is a story of a boy whose heart was full of scars, and how he managed to find light in the darkness. I was born in a small town near Ohio, where in autumn the streets were covered with golden leaves, and neighbors knew each other almost like family. But my family always stood apart. My mother, Laura, died shortly after my birth due to complications, the details of which I still know little about. All I know is that she was the only light I never had the chance to meet. My father, Michael Marston, was a stern man who kept me at a distance, as if my existence reminded him of a pain he wanted to erase. When I turned 3 years old, he married Ellen, a woman with a cold smile and calculating eyes. They had a son, Oliver, whom everyone called Ollie. He became the center of their universe. For my father, he was the pride and the future of the family. For Ellen, he was the meaning of her life, whom she spoiled without limits. And I remained the stepson, the unwanted child, the shadow in a house I called my own. From early childhood, I felt that gulf. When I was 5 years old, I remember sitting in the corner of the living room, watching Ollie receive a remote-control car, the kind every child dreamed of. I was given an old plastic toy with cracked wheels, and my father said that was enough for me. Oliver needs new things for his development, Ellen would say, as though I did not deserve anything better. When I brought home good grades from school, my father would only nod and say, "Not bad, but do not get complacent." But if Ollie got a C, the whole house celebrated, as though he had won the Nobel Prize. I did not envy him. Honestly, I just wanted to be noticed and hugged, even once. With every year, I understood more clearly that I would never be good enough for my father and Ellen. She often said, "Nicholas, why don't you try to be more like Oliver? You should be grateful you live in this house." Those words, even when spoken calmly, cut deeper than any knife. I started to wonder, am I a burden? Do I not deserve love? Our family did not live in poverty, but it could not be called wealthy either. My father worked as a manager at a local insurance company, and Ellen was a housewife who adored Oliver as if he were a little king. I was not allowed to complain, as my father always repeated that I was lucky to have a roof over my head. But that roof never felt like mine. My room was a tiny attic with a rickety bed and a window overlooking a dark alley. Oliver, on the other hand, had a spacious bedroom full of toys and posters of popular bands. One day, I asked my father why I could not have a room like that on the lower floor, and he curtly said, "Do not ask for too much, Nicholas. Remember your place." I grew up with those words, constantly hearing that I was not important in this family, but I did not allow myself to drown in self-pity. I learned to smile and pretend that everything was fine. Though a storm raged inside, I told myself that one day I would leave this shadow and prove that I was not the worthless person they thought I was. When I turned 18 years old, I graduated from school with good grades, but at home, no one cared. I dreamed of going to college, becoming an engineer, and making my grandfather George, the only one who truly cared about me, proud. But that dream quickly collapsed. One evening, I gathered the courage to ask my father about scholarships or student loans. He looked at me with a cold stare and said, "Nicholas, we do not have money. Oliver is a priority. He has enormous potential, and we must invest in him." I stood there, feeling as if the world was crumbling beneath my feet. Oliver, my brother, who only played video games and wandered around with his friends, was the one the family was willing to dedicate all their efforts to. I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply nodded and left the room. That night, lying on my creaking bed and staring at the cracked ceiling, I promised myself that I would rise on my own. If my parents did not believe in me, I would believe in myself. I got a job at the local Yum-Mart supermarket. At first, I worked as a cashier. Then I moved to the warehouse. The work was hard. Long night shifts, holiday duty, and difficult customers wore me out. But I did not complain. Every dollar was a step toward my independence. I rented a small old apartment with stained walls and a leaky faucet, but it was my own space. I no longer had to hear Ellen's cutting remarks or feel my father's judgmental glances. At that time, Oliver continued to receive full support. He studied at a prestigious private school, drove a new car bought by my father, and faced no hardships. One day, Ellen came into the supermarket where I worked. She saw me at the register and smirked. "Nicholas, so this is what you are doing. What a humiliation. Oliver will never have to stoop to such work." I clenched my teeth, forced a strained smile, but inside everything screamed, "Why? Why am I not worthy of the same opportunities as him?" Those years, I lived in solitude. I had few friends, as all my time went to work and saving money. But I was not completely alone. Grandfather George remained the only bright spot in my life. He lived in Chicago, ran a large construction company, and was a man who always kept his word. Sometimes, when he found the time, he would call me. Those conversations were a respite for me. He would tell me about his projects, ask about my life, and repeat, "Nicholas, you are a strong guy. Do not let anyone make you think otherwise." I never told him how my father and Ellen treated me. I did not want to burden him, and perhaps I feared that he would think me weak. Only my grandfather spoke about my mother. He said Laura was a gentle woman who loved books and dreamed of justice. He blamed himself for not being there when she gave birth to me, as he had been at work then. If I had been there, everything might have been different, he said, his voice trembling. I did not blame him. I only regretted that I never met her, to feel, even once, that I was loved. Years passed, and I grew used to my independent life. I learned to fix the plumbing in my apartment, cook simple meals, and not let my heart break further. But deep inside, there was always an emptiness, because I never had a real family. I had no idea that while I was building my life, my father and Ellen were hiding a secret that would change everything. When I turned 21 years old, I was still living in my tiny rented place on the south side of the city, working nights at the supermarket. Empty mornings, simple food, and short sleep became routine. I had little, but I felt free. My own space and a small pride, earned through years of patience. One warm summer morning, as I was scanning items for employees, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Ellen. Come to the new house today. Address: Hollick 1432. A small party. I reread the message several times, staring at the screen as if it could explain what was happening. I had never heard them mention moving. There had been no hint that they were looking for a new home, and no one had ever asked if I wanted to be part of this new life. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to delete the message and pretend it never came, but another part thought that maybe this was a chance to mend things, even a little. I decided that it would simply be a polite visit. Maybe I wanted to congratulate them. Maybe I wanted to show that I was no longer the sullen and quiet child they used to know. I had changed, and I hoped that perhaps they had as well. I went into a small wine shop near the supermarket and chose an inexpensive bottle of red wine. Then I picked up from the workshop a handkerchief with embroidered initials that I had ordered a week earlier. It was a small gift, but I wanted it to feel thoughtful, even if I had very little money. The new house was located in a recently built residential area on the western edge of the city where I had never been before. When my car turned onto a street lined with rows of young maples and perfectly trimmed lawns, it felt as though I had driven into another world. Straight rows of two-story houses with wooden doors, gray shingle roofs, and red brick steps looked as if everything that was part of a carefully drawn picture. There was a sense of abundance and order in that place, something I had never felt in the old house. I parked by a cream-colored house with stone steps, a wide porch, and arched windows looking out onto the garden. Holding the bottle of wine and the gift, I froze for a few seconds in front of the door. My heart was beating far too fast, not from happiness, but from a strange feeling, as if I were about to walk into someone else's space. Ellen opened the door. She wore a silk dress, her makeup neat, like in a photograph. "Oh, Nicholas, come in," she said with a thin smile, no warmer than the faint layer of blush on her cheeks. I stepped inside and looked around. A spacious living room with a gleaming wooden floor, a granite fireplace, soft beige armchairs, and a large classic chandelier. The walls were already adorned with photographs. A wedding portrait of my father and Ellen, Oliver holding a trophy for sports achievements. There were no photos of me, and that did not surprise me. My father was in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine. He wore a white shirt and looked relaxed. When he noticed me, he simply nodded. "Oh, you are here." Nothing more. I handed him the wine and the gift and quietly said, "Congratulations on the new house, Dad." He took them, placed them on the table, and did not bother to unwrap them. There were only a few people at the gathering, new neighbors, an elderly couple of friends, and one of my father's colleagues. They animatedly discussed the neighborhood, the rising property prices, the interior, and plans to build a pool in the yard. I sat in the corner, listening silently. No one asked how I was. No one noticed that I poured myself water instead of wine. "It took us a long time to find this house," Ellen was telling one of the guests, her voice full of pride. "Luckily, we closed the deal before prices began to rise so quickly. Michael has excellent taste in houses." My father nodded, smiling, and said nothing. I sat there, forcing myself to smile along with their conversations. I genuinely wanted to congratulate them, not for the house, but because I thought they had finally found something that made them happy. I did not realize that, at that very moment, I was congratulating them for taking what should have been mine. That night, back in my rented apartment, I picked up my phone to text Grandpa George and asked how he was. But I stopped. He was getting older, always busy, and I did not want to trouble him. I set the phone down, lay on my bed, and stared at the ceiling with its peeling plaster. Then I fell asleep, not knowing that beneath me, like a buried mine, the truth was waiting to explode at any moment. After that evening, everything seemed to return to its usual rhythm, to the familiar mechanical life I had been living for years. No one ever mentioned the housewarming again. No one asked what I thought of the new house. And, of course, no one spoke of me moving in with them. But soon, something strange began to happen. From then on, I started receiving invitations to every major holiday. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Oliver's birthday, even my father and Ellen's wedding anniversary. But these were not warm invitations, just short messages. "Dinner at 6 in the evening. Oliver is waiting. We have guests." Do not be late. I went not because I believed anything had changed, but because I still felt obligated. Each time, I brought a small gift, choosing it carefully and wrapping it by hand. My gifts were almost always set aside, unopened, and no one said thank you. But the strangest thing began when they started calling me to join family photos. The first time it happened was on Christmas. Ellen called out, "Nicholas, stand close at Oliver. We are taking a family picture." I was surprised, but I stepped forward. My father stood in the center, his arm around Oliver's shoulder. I stood to the side, smiling stiffly. When the camera clicked, I felt like an actor in a silent play, given a secondary role just to fill the frame. Each time, they kept calling me for more photos. First with the whole family, then sometimes only with my father. Even Ellen once placed her hand on my shoulder, smiling far too brightly for such a moment. I could not understand what was happening. Before, I had always been excluded from such pictures. In the old house, there were never any photos of me on the walls. Why was everything different now? One time, after Oliver's birthday dinner, I carefully asked, "Why are we taking family photos so often now?" Ellen laughed. "Oh, we just want to preserve memories. You are part of the family too, aren't you?" I nodded, but my chest felt heavy. I was not naive. I understood that something was wrong, even though I could not put it into words. I simply felt as though I was being guided, forced to fit into artificial scenes that had never been mine, as if I were playing the role of a model older son for show, someone whose existence no one truly believed in. And then, on Christmas, when I was 23 years old, the truth finally came out. That day was piercingly cold. I had just finished my shift at 4:30 in the evening, sitting in my rented apartment with a mug of coffee, planning, as usual, to go a little later. I only want to make an appearance, have a bite to eat, pose for a few photos, and leave early. And suddenly, the phone rang. It was my grandfather. "Nicholas, come immediately. I am at your new house. Hollick, 1432. I want to surprise you." I froze. My grandfather was in Ohio. He rarely left Chicago, as his construction company kept him constantly busy. I quickly threw on my jacket and rushed out the door. One question after another spun in my mind. Why had he not said beforehand that he was coming? And why was he at my father's house? When I arrived, the house gleamed with Christmas lights. Wreaths hung on the doors. Through the window, a Christmas tree sparkled with garlands. I knocked, my heart pounding. Ellen opened the door. Her smile froze the moment she saw me. "Nicholas, what are you—" She fell silent. Her eyes darted over my shoulder, and I heard my grandfather's voice from inside. "Nicholas, come in, my boy." My grandfather stood in the living room, tall, imposing. His silver hair gleamed beneath the chandelier. He hugged me tightly. In that embrace, warmth and tension mingled. "I want to surprise the whole family," he said, glancing around. "This house, it is wonderful, isn't it? Are you happy living here?" I hesitated. A chill of unease rose in my chest like an icy wave. I do not live here, Grandpa. I only come to visit." My grandfather's face changed. His smile vanished, his eyes narrowed. He turned his gaze to my father, Michael, who was standing by the fireplace with a glass of wine in his hand. Ellen quickly interjected, her voice syrupy. "George, it is a misunderstanding. Nicholas likes living on his own. Isn't that right, dear?" She looked at me, her eyes almost demanding agreement. But my grandfather did not look at her. He looked at me. His voice became lower, calmer, but even heavier because of it. "Nicholas, tell the truth. You do not live here, do you?" I took a deep breath, feeling as though the walls were pressing down on my shoulders. "I live in a rented apartment, Grandpa, on the south side of the city. I pay for it with my salary from the supermarket." The room sank into a silence, heavy and suffocating, as though the air itself had disappeared. My father lowered his head, gripping his glass so tightly that his fingers turned white. Ellen tried to speak, her voice trembling. "George, we thought this would be better for Nicholas. He wanted to be independent, and Oliver needs space." "Enough!" My grandfather cut in sharply. His voice sliced through the room like a knife. "Michael, Explain yourself. 2 years ago, I sent you $400,000 so you could buy a 3-bedroom house in this area. It was a gift for Nicholas to give him a good start. I made it clear this house was for him. So why is he living in an old apartment while you and your family are here? My father's face turned pale, as though all the blood had drained from it. Ellen opened her mouth but could not produce a sound. I stood there, stunned, feeling as though the world was collapsing beneath my feet. The house meant for me, for $100,000. I looked at my grandfather, then at my father, searching for some kind of explanation, a sign that this was a mistake. But there was no mistake. My father set down his glass, his voice trembling though he tried to sound composed. I thought the house should be used for the whole family. Nicholas is independent. He does not need such a big house. And Oliver is young. He needs space to study, to grow. Does not need it. My grandfather roared, stepping toward him. You are saying he does not need it? Nicholas, my grandson, whom I entrusted to your care, lives in an old apartment, working nights just to survive, while you and your wife have settled into the house I gave to him. What did you do with the money I sent? You registered the house in your own name, didn't you? My grandfather's voice rang with a cold edge. My father did not answer. He only lowered his head, and his shoulders trembled slightly. Ellen, finally finding her voice, tried to intervene. George, you do not understand. Nicholas is not my biological son. Oliver is the future of this family. Nicholas, he does not deserve such a house. He is just... Be silent, my grandfather interrupted her, his voice echoing through the room as if the walls themselves shook. Does not deserve? Nicholas is the flesh and blood of Diana, the son of my daughter. He is my grandson. I entrusted you, Michael, with taking care of him. And what did you do? You stole the gift meant for him. You deceived me with those staged photographs. He pointed at the picture on the wall, where the whole family stood in the living room, while I awkwardly hunched my shoulders at the edge. I believed those photos. I thought Nicholas was happily living here. I trusted what I saw, but it turned out to be nothing more than a masquerade, meant to cover your greed. My throat tightened as I realized that all those moments when I had been made to pose were only to deceive my grandfather, to convince him that I was part of this family. I turned my gaze to my father, hoping for at least an explanation, an apology, anything, but he remained silent. His eyes did not meet mine. Nicholas. My grandfather turned to me, his voice softer now, but still resolute. Go pack your things. You are coming with me to Chicago. This house, I will make sure it belongs to you as it was intended. And you, Michael, prepare to speak with my lawyer. You will answer for everything you have done. Ellen burst into tears, but I did not feel even a trace of pity for her. My father finally spoke. His voice trembled. Nicholas, I only wanted what was best for family. What was best for family? I repeated. My voice was quiet, but cold. You never considered me part of this family. My whole life I tried to earn your pride, but for you there was always only Oliver. You took my chance and could not even find the courage to tell me the truth. I turned away. I could not bear to look at him any longer. My grandfather placed his hand on my shoulder. His eyes were full of pain, but within them was a determined resolve. Come, Nicholas. You do not need to stay here. The chill of the Christmas night stung my skin as we stepped out of the house that had once been meant to be mine. The dim light of the street lamps lit the snowy street, and my heavy breath mixed with the frosty air. My grandfather led me to a black SUV parked at the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man in a formal suit, opened the door for us. First to the hotel, my grandfather said. His voice sounded calm but firm. I sat beside him in the back seat, feeling as though I was crossing into another world. A world I had never thought I would enter. Are you all right, Nicholas? My grandfather asked, his gaze soft but intent, as though he were trying to look straight into my thoughts. I do not know, Grandpa. I replied, my voice trembling. Everything is happening too fast. I do not fully understand what is going on. He nodded and placed his hand on my knee. I know, but from now on, everything will be different. You will come with me to Chicago. We will start anew. Just you and me. I looked out the window. Christmas lights flickered beyond the glass, like faint sparks. Chicago, the city I had only known from my grandfather's stories, the place where he had built his construction empire from scratch. I had never thought I would find myself there, but now it was a new beginning. The next morning, we flew out on an early flight. I sat by the window, watching the snow-covered fields stretch beneath the wing, feeling as though I was leaving behind a worn-out world for the sake of a dream. My grandfather sat beside me, holding a business newspaper. From time to time, he would glance up and give me a reassuring smile. When the plane landed at O'Hare Airport, we were met by the sharp Chicago wind. James, my grandfather's driver, was waiting at the exit with black SUV. We drove through the bustling streets, where skyscrapers towered over the roads, glinting with steel and glass under the winter sun. I had never seen anything like it. Ohio, with its narrow roads and modest houses, felt like a world from the past. The car turned into an upscale suburb, where the streets were paved with stone, lined with old oak trees, and surrounded by luxurious mansions. James stopped in front of massive iron gates. Beyond them, a driveway led to a 3-story mansion nestled among a perfectly manicured lawn and bright red roses. Even in the winter chill, my jaw nearly dropped. "Is this your house, Grandpa?" I asked, my voice trembling. My grandfather chuckled softly and patted me on the shoulder. "Welcome to my home, Nicholas. And now it is your home, too." This mansion was more than just a house. It felt like a palace. A carved wooden door led into a spacious hall with a marble floor, a spiral staircase, and abstract paintings on the walls. The living room was about 3 times the size of my old apartment, with panoramic windows overlooking a garden, a sparkling pool, and a sprawling lounge area. The scent of pine and fine leather from the furniture filled the space, and I felt like a guest in a 5-star hotel. I did not know what to say. I exhaled, still clutching my small bag of belongings. "You do not need to say anything," my grandfather replied, leading me upstairs. "Your room is here." He opened the door to a spacious bedroom with a large bed, a walnut desk, and a window overlooking the garden. On the desk sat a new laptop, and the soft carpet muffled my footsteps. "Here you can start anew. No pressure, no past, just a new beginning." I sat on the edge of bed, feeling as though I were in a dream. Just a few hours earlier, I had been sitting in my old apartment with its leaky faucet and worn-out ceiling, where the plaster had long since peeled away. And now I was here, in a room I had never even dared to dream of before. But along with the overwhelming sense of awe, a deep ache still burned somewhere inside me. The house in Ohio, the one that was supposed to be mine, still lingered like a splinter in my heart. That evening, my grandfather took me to an upscale restaurant in downtown Chicago. We sat in a secluded corner, the soft glow of candlelight casting a gentle light over the table. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine, but I only sipped it, still feel like an outsider in this world of luxury. "Nicholas," he began, his voice quiet and serious, "we need to talk about your father, about the house, and about what happened." I nodded, my heart beginning to beat faster. I knew this conversation would not be easy. 2 years ago, I sent Michael $400,000 so that he could buy a house on Hollow Creek. I wanted that house to be yours, to serve as a foundation of your future. I was consumed with company matters and could not personally handle the paperwork, so I entrusted everything to him. I thought he would honor my requests. He paused, his expression darkening. But I was wrong. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep my voice steady. "So, Father kept the house for himself, and that is not all," my grandfather continued, his voice filling with anger. "I have been sending Michael money since you were a child, not just for the house. Every year, I transferred funds for your school fees, clothes, everything you would need to grow up in decent conditions. I was certain that Michael was taking care of you the way I intended. But today, when I learned that you live in an old apartment and work nights in a supermarket, I realized he kept it all for himself and his new family." It felt as if the blow struck straight to my chest. School fees, clothing, all the things I had never had. The years I had worn hand-me-down clothes, survived on cheap noodles, and worked myself to exhaustion just to cover rent and food. All of it could have been different. The man I had so badly wanted to impress had taken not only the house, but every opportunity my grandfather had meant for me. I did not know about that money, I said, feeling my voice tremble. Father never told me. I thought he simply did not have enough, so I carried the burden myself. My grandfather slammed his fist on the table, making the wine glasses rattle. "That scoundrel," he growled, drawing glances from nearby tables. "I entrusted him with you, believing he would care for you. And he betrayed me, and he betrayed your mother, Diana." When he spoke my mother's name, my eyes stung. I had never seen her, but through my grandfather's stories, I knew what she had been like, kind, dreaming that I would have a better life. The thought that my father had stolen what she and my grandfather wanted to give me ignited a rage inside me that I could barely hold back. "What are you going to do, Grandpa?" I asked, though I could already guess the answer. "I am going to sue Michael," he said, his tone icy. "I will make sure the house is transferred to you, and I will completely cut off his financial support. He does not deserve a single cent." I stayed silent for a long while, staring at the table. Part of me wanted my father to pay for everything he had done. But another part of me, the part raised in constant resentment and pain, was tired. I did not want my new life in Chicago to begin with heavy court battles and endless disputes. "Grandpa," I said, my voice soft but firm, "do not sue him. I know you are angry, and so am I, but it is already done. I do not want to drag the past behind me. Stop supporting him financially. Let him understand that he can no longer take advantage of you. It is enough for me that I am here. I just want to start over." My grandfather looked at me, his gaze softening, though the pain in his eyes still lingered. "Are you certain, Nicholas? You have every right to claim what is yours." "I am certain," I replied. "That house no longer matters. I want to build my own life, not get stuck in old wounds." He slowly nodded, placing his hand on my shoulder. "You are stronger than I thought. Your mother will be proud of you." The following weeks in Chicago became a true emotional test for me. I fully moved into my grandfather's mansion, and each new day felt like a step into the unknown, where I had to learn to live all over again. My grandfather did not just give me a home. He gave me the chance to find myself. He brought me into a construction company, a modern building in downtown Chicago, filled with bright, sunlit offices and a bustling team constantly at work. He introduced me to everyone as his grandson, Nicholas Marston. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, as if I truly had worth. "Would you like to try working here?" he asked me one day as we watched a construction site in the suburbs together. "You do not need to jump into big projects right away. You will start with smaller ones. Learn gradually." I hesitated. I had never imagined myself in construction, with its blueprints and complicated calculations, but the trust in my grandfather's eyes made me want to try. "I will try, Grandpa," I said, "but I cannot promise that I will be good right away." He laughed warmly and sincerely. "No one is born a master, Nicholas, but you have heart and determination. That is all you need." I began working in his company as a simple assistant in the planning department, sorting documents, monitoring project progress. The work was not easy, but day by day, I learned to read blueprints, understand processes, and see how everything fit together. Over time, I even began to share my ideas during meetings. Colleagues, who at first saw me only as the owner's grandson, began to respect my persistence. They saw how I stayed late into the evening, completing tasks, and never tried to use my connection to my grandfather for privileges. Outside of work, I gradually discovered Chicago for myself. I walked along its bustling streets, visited museums, and spent hours in small coffee shops, reading books or watching passers-by. For the first time in my life, I felt I could simply breathe, dream, become who I wanted to be. But even in this new life, the scars of the past did not fade so quickly. There were nights when I lay on the soft bed in my spacious room, and in my dreams, I saw that old apartment with the leaky faucet. I heard Ellen's biting voice, saw my father's cold stare, and I asked myself, do I deserve all this? Or is it only a dream, one that might vanish someday? My grandfather noticed when I became quiet. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, he handed me an old framed photograph, and it was my mother, Laura. She was smiling brightly, holding a small dog in her arms. "Your mother always wanted you to be happy," he said. "I could not be there when she needed my support the most. But with you, I will not let that happen." I held the frame, tears silently streaming down my cheeks. "I wish I could have met her, even just once," I whispered. "You are more like her than you think," he replied. "She was strong but gentle. You have her heart." Those words felt like the balm I had been waiting for my entire life. I began keeping a journal, writing down my thoughts, dreams, and even my pain. I no longer wanted to run from the past. I wanted to face it, understand it, and turn it into strength rather than a burden. One morning, roughly 3 months after moving to Chicago, I received a letter from Ohio. There was no sender's name on the envelope, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was a letter from my father. I opened it, my hands trembling. Inside was a single sheet with a short message. "Nicholas, I know I have no right to write. What I did cannot be forgiven. I took the money your grandfather sent for you and kept the house for myself. I allowed the pain of losing your mother to turn me into someone who was a terrible father. I do not expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I am sorry. Ellen and Oliver have moved out of the house. I am transferring the ownership to you, as your grandfather intended. I hope one day you can look at me without hatred. Michael." I read the letter 3 times. Inside, everything swirled. Anger, pain, a faint trace of relief. I did not know if I could forgive him. The years when I was treated as an outsider could not be erased by a single sheet of paper. But I understood I did not want to carry resentment for the rest of my life. I showed the letter to my grandfather. He stayed silent for a long while as he read, then said, "It is your decision, Nicholas. If you want to accept the house, I will help. If you do not, I will respect your choice." I thought about the house on Hollow Creek, about the green lawn and the fireplace that had once seemed a symbol of warmth. But now I did not need that house to feel my own worth. "I do not want the house, Grandpa," I said. "I want to sell it and put the money toward my education. I want to become an engineer, as I have always dreamed." My grandfather smiled, pride glinting in his eyes. "That is my grandson." I enrolled at a university in Chicago to study civil engineering. Thanks to my grandfather's support and the money from selling the house, I began a journey that had once seemed impossible. The first months were not easy. I was older than most students, and the complex technical courses kept me buried in textbooks late into the night. But I did not give up. Every time I felt like quitting, I thought of my mother, my grandfather, and the promise I had made to myself. I will not let the past dictate my future. In Chicago, I found new friends, people who did not know my past but accepted me as I was. I joined the engineering club, where I met Emma, a smart girl with a radiant smile, who constantly teased me about my habit of taking overly detailed notes. With her and the others, I felt that I had finally found my place. My grandfather remained my rock. He was not just a mentor, but a friend. We often spent evenings by the fireplace, reminiscing about my mother, his early years in business, and my plans of future. The house in Ohio was sold. The money went toward my education. My father never contacted me again, and I did not seek him out. Perhaps one day I would be ready to forgive. But for now, I wanted to live in the present, to build what belonged to me. 2 years had passed since that night, when the truth about the house and the money came to light. Chicago had become my home, not because of its bustling streets and towering skyscrapers, but because I had found myself here. I was already in my 2nd year at the university, studying civil engineering. Each day, I felt I was getting closer to the dream my father had once tried to destroy, using a supposed lack of money as an excuse. I had friends, a purpose, and, most importantly, the confidence that I was worthy of everything I achieved. But while I was building a new life in Chicago, my father's family in Ohio was falling apart. Over those 2 years, I had heard almost nothing about them, only bits and pieces from old acquaintances. They said my father had lost his job at the insurance company. that Ellen no longer threw her loud parties, that Oliver, the pride of the family, had dropped out of college after just one semester. I did not dwell on it. The past needed to stay in the past. But one day, the past came knocking on my door. Late in the autumn, as I was preparing for my midterm exams in the university library, my phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number from Ohio appeared on the screen. I hesitated for a moment, but I answered. The voice on the other end was weak, trembling, stripped of the arrogance I remembered. "Nicholas, it is Ellen," she said, her voice breaking. "I know you are busy, but I need to talk about family." The word family from her lips sounded foreign. I gripped the phone so tightly my fingers turned white. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. "We are in trouble, Nicholas. Real trouble. I thought maybe you could help." I stayed silent, letting her continue. Her voice was strange, a mix of desperation and an attempt to hold on to dignity. She explained that after grandfather had stopped his financial support, everything had fallen apart for Michael. He was fired from his job, unable to focus because of the problems at home. Ellen could not find work. She had never worked and did not know how to earn a living. They sold almost everything they could to cover their debts, but it was not enough. The house on Hollow Creek, the one I had sold, had long since ceased to belong to them. They lived in a cramped apartment on the outskirts, which Ellen called unworthy of our family. And then her voice trembled. "Oliver, he is struggling. Nicholas, he works at a fast food restaurant, but he is not used to it. He does not know how to cope. He needs help." I let out a short, bitter laugh, not from amusement, but from the dark irony. Oliver, the spoiled younger brother who had always been placed above me, now had to fight to survive. The boy who had a new car, a room full of toys, and a carefree life was now working where I had labored when I was 18. For a moment, I felt satisfaction, but it quickly turned into emptiness. "Ellen," I said, my voice calm but firm, "you're asking me for help after everything that happened? After father took my house? After you said I did not deserve a better life? Do you really think I will forget all of that?" Silence filled the line. Then her voice became barely audible. "Nicholas, I know we were wrong, but we are family. Oliver is your brother. You cannot turn your back on family." "Family?" I repeated, bitterness dripping from my tone. "You and father never considered me part of this family. You took everything that was meant for me, the house, the money, the chances, and education. And now you want me to save the one who was always placed above me? No, Ellen. Let Oliver learn to stand on his own 2 feet, the way I had to. That is your problem. I owe you nothing." I hung up. My hands were still gripping the phone, my heart pounding. Ellen's words echoed in my head, but they no longer held any power over me. For the past 2 years, I had not received any direct news from my father, Ellen, or Oliver. Only fragments of rumors trickled through old acquaintances from Ohio. I was not seeking those updates. I had a new life in Chicago, my studies, projects at my grandfather's company, and evenings with Emma, who had become more than just a friend to me. But the rumors always found their way. They said that Michael, once a confident and authoritative man, lost his job at the insurance company just 6 months after grandfather stopped supporting him. The savings he had built from grandfather's money, the very funds meant for me, were squandered on luxuries, a new car for Oliver, trips, parties to maintain the illusion of prosperity. When the money stopped coming, their life collapsed. Ellen, once so proud of her role as the perfect homemaker, could not adapt to reality where earning a living was necessary. She had neither the skills nor the will. Their new 2-room apartment on the outskirts, with its peeling walls and leaking pipes, became a painful contrast to their former luxury. Oliver, who was once seen as the future of the family, dropped out of college after just 1 semester. He could not handle the studies and the responsibility. He took a job at a restaurant, but could not endure the long shifts and constant demands. After 3 months, he was fired, and since then, he had been hopping from job to job, never staying anywhere for long. I learned that Ellen tried selling products online, but her efforts failed. Michael worked part-time in an auto repair shop, but his earnings barely covered food. For the first time in their lives, they were facing the same kind of struggle I had known since my youth. And then another letter from my father arrived. Not an apology, as before, but a plea. He wrote that the family was on the verge of bankruptcy, that they might be evicted for failing to pay rent, that Oliver, after losing his third job, had fallen in with a bad crowd, started drinking, and was getting into trouble, and that I was their last hope. He kept writing the word family over and over, as if that alone should stir a sense of duty within me. I sat on a massive bed in my room at my grandfather's mansion, still not entirely accustomed to this luxury, reading the letter, every line cut deep, reopening old wounds. I remembered those years when I was pushed aside, told I was unworthy, endlessly compared to Oliver, reminded that I was never good enough. I remember the cold nights on the creaky bed in that cramped attic room, asking myself why I was not loved. And that Christmas night, when I learned that the house I had dreamed of and all the opportunities that were supposed to be mine had been stolen by my father and Ellen, I called grandfather and told him about the letter. He listened silently, his eyes darkening, just like that evening 2 years ago. "What are you going to do?" he asked in a steady voice. He never pressured me, always respected my choices, though I knew his anger toward Michael still lived within him. "I am not going to help them," I said firmly. They had their chance. Oliver had everything I never did, a car, a spacious room, the love of our parents. If he now has to work to survive, that is a lesson he needs to learn. I climbed out of nothing. I am not obligated to pull them out of their pit. Grandfather nodded, saying nothing, but I knew he understood. Once, he had wanted to take Michael to court for justice on my behalf, but I had chosen to let the past go. And now I was choosing again not to let the past drag me backward. While Michael's family struggled to survive in Ohio, I continued building my own path in Chicago. I passed my midterm exams, and Emma, my close friend, threw a small celebration for me. She had become an important part of my life not just because of her radiant smile, but because with her, I finally felt worthy without needing to prove anything. I took on more responsibility in grandfather's company, managing major projects, even overseeing a construction site in the Chicago suburbs. Every step confirmed I did not need support from my father or Ellen to succeed. I also began writing a book, not to recount my entire story, but to record the lessons I had learned about resilience, self-respect, and overcoming the scars of the past. Perhaps it would never be published, but for me, it became a way to heal, to turn pain into strength. One winter day, while walking through downtown Chicago, I unexpectedly saw Oliver. He was standing on a street corner in a thin jacket. His face was gaunt, his eyes dull. I froze, unsure if I should approach. But he noticed me first, and a faint flicker of hope lit up in his eyes. "Nicholas," he called in a hoarse voice. "How are you?" I nodded, keeping my distance. "I am fine, Oliver. And you?" He gave a weak smile. This was no longer the smug young man I had once known. "Not well," he admitted. "Things are bad. Can you help? Even a little? I have no one else left." I looked at him, recalling all the years he had been elevated while I had been cast aside. "Oliver," I said calmly but firmly, "I had to stand on my own 2 feet. When no one reached out a hand to me, you will have to do the same. Get a job. Learn to take responsibility. Do not expect me to fix what you and your parents did wrong." I turned and walked away down the snow-covered street. I did not look back, not because I did not care, but because I chose myself.